All right, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to the second talk, or the third talk, depending on what you're counting. So it's awesome, thanks for being here. I know that this is an interesting time slot because I am effectively between you and lunch. And so that's a little challenging. So what I'm going to try and do is make sure I am both at least engaging as well as succinct. And so I promise not to go over 3 hours. Can we just be happy with that? All right, great. No, seriously. So my name is Craig Bowser, and I am talking on baby steps to the next gen SOC. And I have been doing security for over 20 years in various roles, almost all of it blue team. And so that has given me a lot of insight into how security operations has changed over that time. And as a result of just, being in that field, as well as talking to people at cons and online, I've just seen a lot of how, that has changed and is changing going forward. And so that gave me some really thoughts about hey, what's going on with the SOC? What is going on as we move forward, both in the past and in the future? And so the first thing that usually happens is we have someone pronounce that the SOC is dead. And usually that has, gets some interesting engagement going. I mean, just a few months ago, there was a whole Twitter thread between Anton Schervaking and Richard, and I always screw up his name, Bleitek. Richard Bejtlich, on this topic. But the reality is that it's sort of like, the monarchy. It's long live the SOC. The SOC is dead, but really long live the SOC. And the reason that of this disparity, this difference between these two viewpoints is that what's going on is that the SOC isn't really dead, but the SOC is evolving. And this stand microphone, this single in place microphone is driving me crazy. I usually move around on the stage. So hopefully I will not do that. And if I do, then our good tech team in the back will scream and yell and tell me to get back to the mic because they can't hear what I'm saying. But nevertheless, the SOC is evolving. It's moving and it's changing. And really, if you think about where we have come from to today, you understand what's going on, right? Back when we first started, and for some of you, this is before you were started, and for a couple of you, maybe before you were born, which just goes to how old I am. It was the defense of the network was simple. We were on-prem. We had this castle and moat philosophy where we have this hard and crunchy outside and a soft and chewy inside. We had AV, we had firewalls, IDSs were just coming into vogue, and so that was the protection we had. And then we got a few more tools. We started adding remote capabilities to our network. I remember I was, at an organization, and they gave me a 386 box to take home to dial in to do work at home. So I'm, lugging on the subway a monitor, a case with the 386 keyboard, the whole shebang. That was my laptop at the time, right? Quote. It was a whole, base. But anyway, here I am, I'm remote. We have IPSs are just starting. UBAs are nascent. Now, when I say nascent, it's like the concept and very, lab-like UBA. And then we move to where we have more tools, and so we start moving from a castle and a single perimeter. We have the defense in depth concept starting. We have cloud is starting to come out. 2010, remember, is about when AWS started offering services and capabilities. Threat intel and UBA are just starting up. And so EDR, the concept of EDR is again nascent. we moved to the mid-2010s, the mid-teens, and UBA and Threat Intel are all over the place. I remember going to a major conference, 50, 60 vendors, and 80% of those vendors were selling either Threat Intel or UBA. It was like the thing, remember, just like every new thing is the thing, and then it's never the thing. But now we're starting to see also SOARs starting to come out. Although most Linux admins will tell you they've been doing SOAR for years, but that's a whole nother story. Microservices are starting to pop up. And now in the 2020s, we're seeing a shift again as defense in depth is now moving towards zero trust. We have more tools. We have XDR, we have CASB, we have attack surface management tools. We have all these other tools that are coming in, and we're managing all of these, and I'll talk about that, the fact that we're managing all these, but we're adding mobile and operational technology into the things that we need to protect. And so our SOCs also have changed a little. We went, when it was all on-prem, in the early days, that we could put everybody in a room with monitors and screens and blinky lights and things like that, and that was good. And then, we started having the ability to remote monitoring and remote analysis, and COVID and the quarantine drove this quite a bit. And now, we have a lot of people, most people are either fully remote or at best hybrid in their SOCs. Now, a SOC, by the way, traditionally we think of it as the picture on the left, but really what the SOC is, and really kind of balances out, is it's a group of people doing security, monitoring, detection, response, right? So whatever you want to call that, your security operations team, your incident response, your CERT, whatever you want to call the SOC, it's a generic term for that group of people in your organization that are doing the security and monitoring for your organization. So this is kind of where security, as far as the team goes, and where we're going with the tools. And so, so what we have now is this, but we still have a SOC architecture that looks like this. We have a bunch of tools on the left here that are sending data to some kind of central repository. Now, most of the time that's a SIEM, but it could be other capabilities, other storage and analytical capabilities. I'm just using SIEM as that generic term because most groups have that. But you have this SIEM, you have a tiered group of people that are doing analysis and monitoring of the data coming in of rules and such. You have some ticketing case management system. You maybe have some threat intel. You maybe have a SOAR. And when I say maybe, I mean a lot of places do, but not every place does. And that's how our today's SOC is. But the reality is that this architecture, the way this SOC is designed, is really geared toward defending, monitoring, and protecting the defense in depth capability with a limited amount or a certain amount of data coming in. And so what is the problem with that? Well, that has created some challenges in today's environment as the networks and the enterprises that we are charged with protecting have changed faster than our SOC architecture. First of all, the elephant in the room, which no one will be surprised, is the lack of personnel to do the monitoring, protecting. I don't really have to talk much about that. You guys talk about it all the time. We all do. We've talked about it for 10 years, and we'll probably talk about it for the next 10 years. Getting enough personnel to do this is hard. We are managing an increasingly complex security stack, which includes on-prem, cloud, and mobile capabilities. The Cisco Security Outcomes Study stated that on average, there are 63 security tools, and I will come back to that number later in the presentation, but there are 63 security tools that a single organization is responsible for managing, administrating, monitoring, and responding to. That's a lot of tools. And not all of them work the same way. And for those of you who do multiple things, your head explodes trying to figure out which tool you're in at what time. you have limited visibility into an increasing attack surface, okay? Your attack surface, by the way, if you haven't figured out on your own, is increasing, it's growing as we expand into the cloud, as we expand to mobile, as we expand around the world into new locations, offer more services. That is just more places for the attacker to target, and you have to monitor all those. That's challenging. You are not able, the SOCs are less and less able to operate at scale to handle better attackers with increasing volumes of attack. There's just attacks going on all the time from multiple places, and by the way, at more scale. And by the way, you have not been cloned yet. And so that's hard. Of course, cloning would solve problem number one, but that's another story. So we're still fighting this fight. This fight probably will be fought forever, but it still adds to the problem, right? Where you have compliance, which we use to get resources, so it's not bad, but it goes up against best practices, which goes up against effective security, which goes up against operations in IT. So these are all things that we're trying to fight and balance between the two. That's hard. Attackers' primary targets now are no longer devices. They are identity and data. And so we have, we have to shift how we think. If you haven't already, there are organizations that have, but if you haven't already, shift how you think about what, we have to do that, and not every place has. So how did we get to how did these challenges come about? First of all, operations shifted. They moved to the cloud. They moved to DevOps. And they did this 10 years ago, and most security is not even close to being able to help in this manner. We are, so operations is pushing out updates and changes and new things, 2 to 3 to up to 8 times a day, depending on the industry that you are in. And you are woefully behind. You're still waiting it to show up in your test lab so you can run through a battery of tests to determine if it should be pushed to production or not. Operations says they have bypassed you in many ways, and and because they cannot slow down to wait for your testing or analysis. In some ways, there are definitely organizations that have adapted to this process, but at the same time, it is a challenge to ensure that, the update that was pushed out at 11 a.m. is secure when there are already 4 revisions past that at 3 p.m. So that is a challenge. We have moved to a remote, mobile, anytime, anywhere access. That is whether it's your users or your customers, right? There is a desire to, hey, I need access to the data, I need access to the store, whether I am at Starbucks, at home, on the beach, in the mountains, I'm on a laptop, or I'm on a phone, I'm on a tablet, or I'm on some kind of IoT device. Anytime, anywhere, that's hard. We don't control most of those endpoints. All right, this is different than when we controlled almost all the endpoints, almost all the access and the location. So we're no longer at that point. I do have some good news. Security has become better. Anyone currently worried about Red Alert or Slammer? Anyone? No? Those are still out there. They're still popping around the internet. We're not worried about those things, right? So security is better than it was 20 years ago. Who remembers your network shutting down? Right, having to unplug that network because of those things. Yeah, we don't care anymore, whatever. But guess what? The attackers are way past that. The script kiddies are way past that. So, the script kiddies are like, Slammer? That's old stuff, right? So the attackers are better, but so are we. So that's good and bad, but all right. Security tools and methodologies have increased in number and complexity. I've already talked about that, and so that's hard. That's a lot more data from a lot more tools. Each one of those tools, according to the vendor who sold it to you, is the most important thing since sliced bread. And most importantly, we no longer operate under the assumption that our networks are unhackable, okay? we used to think that if we do all the things and turn all the knobs and patch all the devices, that we will be unassailable. We don't think that anymore. We think if we ever get to that point, then somebody's just going to find some unknown 0 day or 5 of them, or basically fish my CEO or CFO or secretary of the CEO, and they're still going to get in. So we are no longer under that assumption. So we don't operate. We don't think about that. That maybe that keeps us up at night, or maybe we just go, whatever. I just go to sleep because it's the same scary story. But that's no longer the thing. So what's the solution? Spoiler alert, it's in the title. So we become next gen. But what does that mean, right? You've probably heard this. People are like, oh, next gen, next gen, next gen. So what does that mean? Well, let me tell you how I am defining it for the purposes of this talk. How I am going to define a next gen talk covers several things. First, we are shifting our security strategy from defense in depth to zero trust. And I know zero trust is a big buzzword, but I'm telling you it is coming, and it is coming like a very slow-moving freight train. And I say slow-moving because this is not an overnight flip-a-switch thing, but a freight train, nevertheless, that is coming. And it is different for everybody, so don't assume like, oh, I can't do it because I'm too small. Just, it adapts. So, but shifting our thought and our process and our strategy to this concept is a key part. Routine attacks and alerts are handled by automation, right? Get rid of the crap that you see all the time, every day. You know what? It's like, I think about it like if your bill pay, you just say, pay this bill. As long as the bill for my cell phone is beneath X amount, just automatically pay it. Actually, banks don't have that setting. It would be great if they did. Just, a less than or equal to pay this amount automatically. If greater than this thing, give me an alert. That would be awesome. If you patent that, give me credit, please. But nevertheless, just anything in a routine, it's just automated. Just do it. I don't even want to see it. Alerts are enriched and triaged. So the things that don't get automatically handled, they come in fully enriched. Most of you, hopefully, are already doing enrichment for your alerts. If you're not, get to it. Add data to your alerts that makes your analysts be able to make decisions faster and more accurately because they don't have to go find out stuff that is related to the alert they're looking at. So it should show up with all the information they need to make a 30-second decision right away. And then triage as much of it as possible. That, automation doesn't necessarily mean you take care of things without human intervention. It can mean that, but it can also mean that you have done as much as possible with minimal risk to your operations, to your business, and now you put it in front of a human to make final decision or the final decisions. Right, so you are, triaging as much as possible. If you think about like medical triage, sometimes the nurse or the EMT does as much as possible and then gives it to the doctor to go, okay, do this, do that, do the other. Right, so that's really where I'm talking about. Thinking about triaging your alerts as much as possible before the human gets there. Whoops. So detections and automated responses are constantly being built and tuned. So you have DevSecOps, you have DevOps in your security, where your alerts and your automations are constantly built and tuned. And 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 times a day, you're pushing out these updates. It's changing based on feedback and results. So Next Gen SOC is doing this. So logs and events then also have to be ingested from a variety of sources. You have increased the amount of data you're pulling in, and I get that comes at a cost, and we'll talk about how to manage that in a slide or two, but you're pulling in all of that stuff so that you can have detection and automated responses, and so you can take care of routine and alerts by automation. And then finally, you're using ML, machine learning, and AI, and threat intel alongside of automated alerts. All of these things are helping you generate high, drawing a blank on the word, low false positive, high fidelity, thank you, that was it, high fidelity alerts, right? You're using this, so where you can create atomic alerts are things like, if I see this and this, give me an alert, because those two things are bad. That very simple alerts, like, yes, no, on, off alerts. As opposed to machine learning and AI type of alerts where it requires a lot more processing and thought and large volume analysis. So, using all of those together to help defend it. So that's really what I see as a next-gen SOC. So how do we go from, what does that look like in reality? What does that look like practically? In real life. So we're going to talk about that picture. So keep in mind that how today's SOC architecture was pictured a few slides ago, and we're going to start migrating. We're start evolving that to next-gen SOC, because this is not a overnight journey. You're not going to go back and go, okay, here are the things we need to do, and we're going to have them done by next year. No, this is just like zero trust, just like anything. It's going to take 3, 5, 10 years of change, slow change, but deliberate, planned change and flexible change, because things will be different in 5 years than they are now. But but this is how, this is the steps you need to take. And by the way, also, you can grocery shop in this, right? If you are a large multi-billion-dollar worldwide organization, you may be able to do all of these things. If you are a $100 million, 30-person, organization, maybe you only do 4 or 5 of these things. The concept is that you are getting to the point where you are doing, implementing many of those overall capabilities, regardless of how many of the actual steps you are able to do. You have to find a way to do it with the resources and capabilities at your level that you have. So let's jump into it. So phase 1, and by the way, I broke this into phases, not that you have to follow this order, but just because I tried to group things that made sense. So phase 1, what you're going to do is you're going to increase your automation and integration. Okay, that same Cisco outcome study also said that tools that are able to be integrated well with each other increase the efficiency and effectiveness of your security team. And this makes sense, right? So I've been doing a demo lab. I've been trying to build a demo lab that has some automated response capabilities in the demo lab. And I will tell you that we found out that some of the tools we're using don't integrate well. They don't have full API capability. Like one of them says, yeah, you can create a user using an API, you can delete a user, but I can't suspend a user. Okay, now I gotta either not use that tool or do something else, right? I can't suspend a user in that tool. So I need better integration capabilities. I don't need you to open up your vendors. I don't need you to open up your secrets. I need you to just allow me to access the things that I can do in the GUI via remote API. So I can just have your tool A push data to tool B, and then based on that, tool C does something. And I want to just do that in a script. I don't want to have to point and click. So better integration and automation, increase that. Ingest threat intelligence, ingest relevant threat intelligence. And I say that because I was working with a client a few months ago. It's a big US-based pharmaceutical international company. And one of their threat feeds was for Australian public schools. And I said to them, why are you having this threat feed? I don't see that. And they were like, well, just in case there's something relevant. And I'm not exactly sure why they think a threat against Australian public schools is relevant to big pharma based in the US, but okay. But I think that's a waste of time and money and resources. So ingest relevant threat intelligence. Plan for a migration to cloud-based SOC tools. Your on-prem tools will not be able to, if they are already falling behind, be able to handle the amount of data that you will need to ingest and the amount of processing and compute capabilities you will need to have, going forward as you start basically protecting your network at the level that where you have mobile and remote and cloud and DevSecOps. You're not going to be able to ingest all that and process all the information at a level on-prem. Or, well, you could, but you're going to spend so much money on hardware to do it. So just start moving to the cloud. Take advantage of that flexibility and elastic and expansion capability. Start creating and refining metrics that will drive your planning and prioritization of tasks. And by that, I mean things like how many of your current tasks are you automated? What percentage of those tasks are automated? How much of your how many of your devices have you that are part of your network have you identified? How much of your data have you identified? How much of your data have you labeled, right? These are things, this isn't like, mean time to resolution metrics. These are things like how are we making our SOC better at protecting and more efficient at protecting? So these are metrics that drive those steps, not just, we didn't detect that attack for 20 days or 90 days or whatever. Speaking of which, start getting inventory. I have asset here, but I really should say of your assets, your data, and your identities. All right, I mentioned before that attackers are going after data and identities now, so you need an inventory of those of the data you have and the identities that access it. As well as the assets, if you still have assets. Not all of us, not all places have assets anymore. Those of you who work for companies that are completely cloud-based, you don't have assets. So then do you have an inventory of the data that's important? And do you know where that data is? Do you know who's accessing it and if they should be? Start getting that information. And so based on that, then you start planning and shifting to monitoring and protecting the data and identity rather than the devices that are, that you have or that are accessing it. So as you get to that point where you are doing those things well, in my opinion, then you start moving to phase 2. So phase 2 is where you are implementing technology because now you are ingesting a lot more data. But you don't need all that data in your security tool. So stop sending it to your security tool. Send it somewhere else because you're going to need a lot of this data that you are collecting for compliance, for forensics, for incident response, but you don't need it. Oh, and for machine learning analysis and algorithms and possibly AI type use. But you don't need it in your security tool, which is more expensive to collect and ingest and store. Send it somewhere cheaper and then access it there. So get a tool that does this routing. Send all that stuff somewhere else. Begin your migration, if you haven't already, to cloud-based SOC tools. I beat on this horse on the last slide. So start the migration that you planned in phase 1. Or continue it if you had already started that. Begin using machine learning to analyze large data sets. Start simple and build on that, right? This is, and to do it well doesn't mean you just go in and turn on all of the algorithms. It means understanding which algorithm applies to you and your environment and start turning those on or building your own and just moving slowly through that process, right? This is not sort of like, remember, a lot of people, when we first got SIMs, we just turned on all the default rules. We should have learned this lesson. We don't do that. Unfortunately, we still find places that do this. Don't do that. Spend the time, analyze it. I get it. There's a lot of stuff you have to do, and doing customized, focused review of these things takes time. I get it, but it's time well spent because the end result is higher fidelity results, higher fidelity alerts. And speaking of which, going back to the first point here, the routing and filtering logs, that means you have to spend time looking at the data that you're collecting and deciding whether it actually should come into your security tool or not. And if it comes in, do you need all of the fields? I was at a client recently that was pulling in AWS CloudTrail logs, and they were just pulling in all the fields. There's like 50 fields per event. Stop. You don't need 50 fields to do security. You maybe need 20 or maybe 10. The rest of them send to the data lake. Okay, but that takes time to look and analyze what's in those fields. I get it. That's a lot. And you're running around with like a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest. You're busy. I get it. But spend 30 minutes a week, or an hour a week doing this, and over time, you will make progress. Okay? You're not going to do this all at once. You're going to just take, like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. All right? So take the time. All right. Moving on to my next soapbox. I have a lot of them, but start using UBA and RBA. All right, where you're building alerts based on a series of behavior, not just atomic actions, right? Not just singular actions. So you're going to get higher fidelity alerts because you're not just saying if this thing happens, then send me an alert, and now I got to go figure out if everything else that happened around it means that this thing that happened was bad, right? Now you're building like if I see this and this in this time frame with this person from this site, and he's done it 4 times, then send an alert. Okay, that's a much better alert than just hey, someone logged in at 2 a.m. Okay, so, and now you have to figure out, well, did they log in on purpose, whatnot, so spend the time, build this out. Start building your security focused on identity and data. Use the metrics that you started in the phase 1. Keep using that metrics to drive and also to evaluate the effectiveness of your tools. Guess what? You may find out as you're going through this that your tools aren't very good or they're redundant. So get rid of them. Oh my gosh, you don't know how long it took us to deploy that tool. Yeah, I do. I was part of DoD when we rolled out HBSS. I get it. And you wonder why it's still there, because it sucks to remove. But you know what? I'm not talking about HBSS, but if the tool in your organization you determine, wow, it's not very effective, and we're using this one much better than that one, then go rip it out. Yeah, spend the whatever amount of hours it's going to take to rip it out, but the end result is better protection and more efficient, then it's worth the effort. And start using AI to explore appropriate tasks. I'm thinking, I don't understand. I have to confess, I'm not, a big GPT fan. But just like every technology, this is only going to get better. So 5 years from now, it's going to be better. And so what can you use it for? Can you use it to help write rules? Can you use it to help threat hunt? Can you use it to do simple automated response, right? How can you use this tool? Because it's a tool. How can you use it in this environment? So explore that, figure that out. I don't have anything specific. That's 5 years from now. Maybe by then it'll be different. All right, so phase 3. All right, so this is where we're coming in. We're coming in for the landing, right? We're getting to the point where we're getting to that next-gen SOC. So at this point, you should have completed your migration to the cloud. You should have all of your data storage, all of your analytical capability, all of your compute. Everything should be in the cloud, all your remediation. So it should be reaching back into any on-prem places that you have and doing remediation. So all of that should be there. And so that you're taking advantage of the scalable costs and the scalable storage there. You have a detection engineering DevSecOps process in place. Okay, you are writing rules and writing automation and writing and building and updating and tuning this stuff on a regular, repeatable, consistent basis that happens multiple times a day. So this process is in place. And so you are able at this point to keep up with ops, okay, and their deployments. This is the goal. You want to be pacing ops, like half a step behind, if not in front of ops. But you need to, get to that point. Organize your teams out of tiers. They should be built on skill sets. This is going to do so much for our ability. It's going to help our hiring, because we're going to be able to hire junior people, entry-level people. They're going to enter into an environment where they can learn and grow. They're not expected to know everything right away, and so we can train them. We can build them up, and they can decide as they get more and more seniors, they move from entry to junior to mid to senior, do they want to be a threat hunter? Do they want to be an incident responder? Do they want to be a security engineer, right? They're going to stay if you have that environment where you bring them on and raise them up and train them up, and they're going to have the OJT and the support system to do that. But that only happens if you have them in teams and not in tiers. Because in tiers, you say, well, I don't have any space in my tier 2. And they're going to go, well, then I'm going to go somewhere else that has open position at tier 2. But if you're just like, well, now I'm no longer junior, I'm a mid-person analyst. And boom, that's what you are. You're not like, oh, I'm tier 2. You're just a mid-analyst. And then I'm going to be a threat hunter. Okay, you're still on the same team. And now you're a threat hunter. You don't have to be worried about like, oh, I need this position, right? Partner with an MSP or an MDR to cover gaps. I get it. Not all organizations can or want to do all the things or do it all the time. So make that decision, partner with somebody where you're going to outsource and how you're going to outsource. And then, tying back into the teams concept, you want to develop, fund, and implement a comprehensive training program. Now, I'm not saying go out and hire teachers. I'm saying, at a minimum, build an Excel spreadsheet that has, hey, here's all the videos to go and watch on YouTube or the internet to be a threat hunter. And these are, go watch these, go read these blogs, and then go do it. Oh, by the way, here are some VMs that you can download and install and learn how to threat hunt. That's your training program. It costs you nothing, okay? You have and you give that spreadsheet to somebody, and they check off each item as they do them, and they hand it back, and you say, good job. Here's your next spreadsheet. Go learn how to be an incident responder. Watch these videos, read these blogs, here's some VMs, check them off, and give them back to me, right? Now, that's simple. You can do that. It's free. You can also, get a company subscription to like Udemy or Cybrary or, name your platform of choice. Or you could, go and hire, Black Hills to come in and give, on-site training. Whatever your flavor is, but build that. Have that in-house, right? So that you have the capability to hire some entry-level guy and train them up. And I'm going to steal Understudy's comment when we were having this conversation last night. By the way, entry level in security is not necessarily an entry level position, right? You have to come in as security, even as entry level, with some basic knowledge. And so we have to kind of change that. And that's a whole nother story of a whole nother lecture. So, but that's tier 3. So wrapping up here, how do you get there? So some strategies. First of all, start with what you have, okay? You're not gonna rip and replace. You're not gonna just throw out everything out that you're doing. So start with what you have. Increase the use of managed services to cover gaps where you need. But you can pull those back in-house later. That's fine. To do is like, hey, we need you for a year. My company has a managed service, and there are plenty of places that say we need you for 6 months. And then at that point, we'll have the in-house stuff back, and that's it. And that's the contract. We go in, we cover them for 6 months, and then we hand it over to their in-house people. Boom, done. That's awesome. Those are cool. All right, so you can do that. I'm not bothered, but but that's fine. Simplify the tools. Talked about the number of tools that you have, right? It's possibly 63, so figure out which ones you don't need. Take them out. Make yourselves more efficient. Simplify take that stress out. At the same time, increase the amount of tools that have good integration with each other, okay? Figure out where that is, right? Make that happen. Hire and develop internally, externally, skills that you need coming up: cloud, programming, DevOps, data analytics skills. All of those are going to be crucial skills that we need to have, okay, going forward. Formalize your SecOps process. Begin your zero trust journey, okay? So some conclusions as I come in here, just wrapping up. So no two SOCs will look alike, okay? There's a lot of stuff here, and some of you are probably going, we're not doing all that. We can't afford that. I get it, okay? I've worked for small companies pretty much my entire life. I get that. That's why I say figure out what is applicable and what you can do and how you can do it, because at the end of the day, what you want is a SOC that has the capabilities I talked about at the beginning, right? And not everybody is going to be able to do all of the steps, but there are ways that you can, achieve those goals without spending millions or billions of dollars. So implement and continue automation efforts. That's going to help. Consume tailored threat intel. We talked about that. Don't consume Australian public school threat intel models unless you are Australian public schools. Shift your operations to the cloud. Start protecting identity and data instead of devices. Change your thinking. It's too easy. That's even in my head. I have to change what I say, change how I think, change how I plan. Increase the telemetry that you're ingesting. Develop machine learning and data analytic capabilities. Plan for CI/CD, detection engineering, basically DevSecOps the heck out of your detection and monitoring and automation. Use short and long-term planning, okay? This is not an overnight thing. You are going to need to plan this out over time. And that short and long-term planning allows you to change midstream, okay? I get it. 2 years from now, the landscape could be completely different, right? 4 years ago, who was planning on COVID? Nobody. That shifted everything. So change your plans, right? Things are going to happen. So with that, I'll take any questions. I will say that, I'm going to come back to this slide in a minute. Here are some references. The top references is a paper I wrote on this. It's about, probably at this point, about a year old. So this talk is updated. But if you want that paper, you can go to that website, GuidePoint Security, Resources, SOC, the Next Generation. You will have to give up blood samples, some data to get it. I do say thank you to my company for allowing me to use their logo and their formula on this talk. But feel free to reach out to me. And with that, I have a few minutes for questions. Thank you. In the back. So the question is, where would I put MSPs, like malware sharing platforms? I think you like MISP. I would put that under threat intel, absolutely. If you are managing and running your own, as opposed to subscribing to Anomaly or some such company. Yes, sir.
Let's say you're planning to outsource the majority of your SOC capabilities. What are the most important questions or considerations to ensure that SOC vendor is reliable, next gen, and appropriate coverage?
So I don't have 50 minutes for so let me let me back up. So the question is, if you're going to outsource your SOC, what are some good questions to make sure that you have reliable vendor to do it? That's a good summary of it. And my initial answer to that is I don't have 50 minutes for another talk. But I would absolutely talk about what their processes are, how they take feedback, how they verify that they are monitoring everything, and how they how you can communicate to them what your critical data, identities, and devices and processes are so they know what to prioritize. Yes, ma'am. I personally am not, but I'm a little bit biased because I've had people say, hey, let's look over this Python program I wrote with ChatGPT, and I have to spend like an hour debugging it. So there is definitely talk about that, about AI and things like the GPTs and the BERTs changing threat. But I think at the end of the day, that most of, when you look at what exploits come out, and vulnerabilities are found and exploits, and vulnerabilities found, a lot of that is human intuition of looking at something and going, oh, that's funny. I wonder why that does that, right? And sometimes, and that's not something that, I think you may see commodity stuff come out of it, but I don't think you're going to see the really advanced stuff. That's my personal opinion. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Say again, I didn't hear you. Right, so the question was, I had said earlier that there's often conflict between compliance and best practices, and insurance companies sometimes ask you to do best practices, and so what are my thoughts on that? Is that a good summary? So a lot of times compliance tries to say, comply with best practices, and maybe points to something like NIST 853, or some ISO model or something like that. And in that case, sometimes those are the same. But at the same time, we have to remember that sometimes best practices are just aren't necessarily enough, and that a compliance standard doesn't always match that. And so a best practice can not only be an implementation, but an understanding of the environment in which that implementation occurs. And so there's still that sometimes difference, and you have to figure out how to cover that difference, cover that gap between what I can expect and what should be done. A good example is PCI. Right, so PCI has compliance, and compliance is based on best practices, you would think, but there's still that gap between there and effective security. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Yes?
You mentioned shifting your perspective to protecting data and identity. So I think data security in and of itself is a massive field and undertaking. So where do you start as far as like tool types for protecting data, and how do you distinguish between structured and unstructured data protection?
So the question is, as I said, I talked about shifting strategy from protecting devices to protecting identities and data. And so what are some thoughts on tools or capabilities that you would employ to do that, and especially in the difference between structured and unstructured data? Is that a fair summary? Excellent. So, wow. I think that just talking about the overall change in your strategy, I think when you talk about the protecting devices, that's very much like I have a physical thing and I can easily control what goes in and out of that thing. Even if that thing is an instance in the cloud as like EC2 or Azure or such, it's a thing and I can control what goes in and out. As opposed to data, which can be anywhere and moves often, right? I'm not going in and I'm not picking up a server and moving it from, from this data center to that data center, or I'm not moving an EC2 instance from, from this availability zone to that availability zone. But data can shift all the time. It can have multiple copies. Same with identities. They can be just anywhere at any time, moving through places. And so what you end up doing is you start looking for tools that are able to identify that stuff. And some tools can do that, sort of, but I think those tools are still very much at the beginning. We're still trying to figure out how to, these tools are still trying to figure out the best way to track this data and keep track of it and control access to it, as well as trying to manage our identities. And because the challenge with identities is that everything you connect to has a different way of identifying you. Even if you have SSO, all SSO is a front end to everything you're accessing. And so everything you're accessing has an identity. All you do is they have one reference to many things. And so it's very nebulous. I think we're not there yet. We're starting to. But for those of you who have worked in trying to build actual identity and data protection, especially if you're doing any kind of zero trust engineering, you realize this is hard. And it's hard tracking it, hard matching it, and it's hard, it's hard protecting it. And I think we have a long way to go with that. There are some tools out there. I mean, I'm not going to talk about them because we sell some of them, but some are better than others. But we're a ways yet from there. Does that answer your question, or at least give you, some warm fuzzies? All right, awesome. Anyone else? Awesome. Well, thanks for coming out to my talk. I'll be around, as I said. I'm reachable on the interwebs, and thanks appreciate all your feedback. So awesome.